All right, welcome everybody to episode number 2 of the Out of Bounds podcast here on fingerlakes1.com. Josh Durso, Nate Sharman here inside the fingerlakes1.com studio. We also have producer Paul Russo behind the desk working hard as ever with his Ricky Fowler fan gear on. Nate, we have quite a bit to talk about, including our abysmal picks last week, which were maybe the toughest part of week 1, episode 1 of a podcast like this, is trying to pick winners when it could go really bad.
Yeah, we both had miscuts last week. I think maybe what we should do is pick a guy on the LIV Tour this week. That way we can't miss the cut.
Can't miss the cut and already got paid, so they're already winners, right? So we've got a ton to talk about. Obviously, we're kicking things off today with the biggest story in golf over the last 6 or 7 days or so, which has been Henrik Stenson getting paid and taken off. He is now officially gone to the LIV Tour, which I think is probably only big news because of the Ryder Cup context, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Henrik Stenson, like you said, released a statement on Twitter. I think it was late last week or mid last week, denouncing the PGA Tour and going to the LIV Tour, kind of noting that he's going to have to give up his Ryder Cup captaincy, but he seems like he's okay with that. Released this really huge, long statement that could have been summed up with, "I did it for the money," in my opinion, after reading it. So I think it's going to be interesting. It kind of parallels to two different arguments that we can talk about with the Ryder Cup. Is, are they going to end up letting guys from the LIV Tour into the Ryder Cup, and B, who's going to be the new captain of Team Europe? I think those are the two biggest storylines. Yeah,
and it's interesting. I thought the kind of takeaway I had from that big, long statement that you talked about is a lot of back and forth. On one hand, he made it very clear that it was at least partly a financial decision, but he also spent a lot of time talking about all of the other ways that he's been, I think, from his perspective, a good steward of the game, a good steward of the PGA Tour, and how it seems like he wants the door left open for a PGA Tour return down the line, which goes back to that broader debate about, whether or when LIV players will be allowed to play in PGA Tour events down the road, kind of a separate thing. But it creates a little bit of uncertainty around the Ryder Cup and what's happening with the Ryder Cup, and obviously who's going to be the captain. Do you have any early leaders on who you think might be selected as captain?
I think a lot of the public would like to see a co-playing captain between Rahm and McIlroy.
Yeah.
I also think Patrick Harrington is a good option too.
Yeah.
I would, if I were to be a betting man, I would think they would name Harrington the captain, just because of the history there and things like that. So I think that he could be the one. I kind of think it's going to happen. But I think Rahm, Rory would be cool kind of co-captains, playing captains too. It's kind of fun.
I think it would. And you and I we talked a little bit earlier about, the idea of playing captains and how we feel personally about that. I don't necessarily know that I love playing captains. But at the same time, in this situation, again, it feels like if you're going to make them the captains, it feels very reactionary and like you're trying to give it back to LIV, because those are the two players who have been most out front from the Euro team, we'll say, who've been opposed to LIV and opposed to the concept of the LIV Tour. I look at it as none of these things are that paramount. Clearly they've got a roster of, I should say, the powers to be know who are going to be the captain for the Euro team over the next 5 years, right? That's not a secret. So do you just kind of shuffle things forward one cycle, and kind of avoid it that way? Patrick Harrington would kind of be like a sensible fit in that regard. The other thing, and I think this is the broader question, does it damage the Ryder Cup? I don't know if it necessarily damages the Ryder Cup, but I think the Ryder Cup has a couple problems to solve in terms of how it fits into the game of golf, especially with Olympic golf now existing. Prior to Olympic golf, this was one of the only ways that you really got to see golf on a global stage, and now it isn't. I feel like it's kind of lost some of its luster because of that.
Yeah, I think it kind of aligns to what you said last week about the PGA Tour. It forces you to say, we need to change. We need to find ways that we are lacking here and get them better. And, it's something everyone thinks about, playing for your country, how much that means to you.
Right.
And it does mean, I mean, it'll ask a lot of guys, and it means a ton to them, and I understand why. But maybe it doesn't mean a ton to them against all the money that they've gotten from LIV. Maybe that doesn't really matter to them as much. So I think it's something that the Ryder Cup can kind of sit back and think about a little bit more, along with, like you said, with PGA Tour last week, kind of having to sit back and looking at their options. And I think that's something that can make them better in the long run, for sure.
Well, and so here's another question to that. What do you, if you're, we'll say, not one of the top 3 or 4 players on a Ryder Cup team, but maybe one of the, we'll say, 8 to 11, your guys that maybe, or even a little beyond that, the guys that are kind of on the fence, especially with how deep, for example, the American team is now. What is more important to you as an individual golfer, the Ryder Cup or the Players' Championship? Or any other medium to high profile tour stop throughout the year? I don't know that it even gets up to that level. I'll put the majors in their own category because I don't think it's fair to compare a Ryder Cup to a major, any of them. But even some of the high profile regular tour stops, I don't think that the Ryder Cup has the same luster as those do, or even some of the World Golf events.
I just think they're different.
Much.
A team event, it's just so much different.
And to that point, you and I were just talking a little before we came on here about how it would be cool to see more team events if the tour were really going to think about how it could potentially, make things more interesting, right? Yeah, and the other thing too that I keep coming back to is we have so much time between now and the Ryder Cup that this announcement that happened last Wednesday already kind of feels like it's come and gone in a lot of ways, right? So not that seismic. I'm sure everybody involved will figure it out, and the Ryder Cup will happen next year, almost without this even in mind.
Yeah, 100%. You'll move on and you'll do it next year.
But jumping ahead here, we have a winner, 3M winner, happened to be the guy who I said was probably never going to win another golf tournament. 2 bad takes in the first show. It's rough for me. Tony Finau. He is a winner after an incredible Sunday. Just one of the more impressive rounds of golf we've seen, granted, in a weaker field, weaker event. What were your takeaways from that?
The biggest takeaway to me is he's 5 shots down with 11 holes to go. Right. That's something that I don't really want to enter the mind of a PGA Tour golfer, but you're looking at the scoreboard and you see here 5 shots down with 11 to go, and you go, I got to take some chances. I got to really try to shoot the lowest possible round I can and not maybe skew away from your game plan a little bit. I don't think Tony necessarily did. He kept playing his game, and he got a couple breaks too with that ball barely staying in bounds there on the par 3. It's either 16 or 17. He had Scott Piercy kind of, I don't know if implode is a good word or not, but just kind of falter on that back 9, especially to give up the lead. So that combined with Tony Finau playing really steady golf and really his brand of golf on that back 9 led him to the victory.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little more about Piercy in a couple minutes here, but I guess the biggest takeaway I had after the tournament was over with, obviously he played the best golf he could play, and he played the best golf he needed to play to win, but he wins with this absurd mashup of golf clubs in his bag. He's playing with a Ping G425 driver, Callaway Rogue 3-wood, Nike Vaporfly 3-iron, Nike Vaporfly 3-iron. Think that club has been out of circulation now for 6 or 7 years. Ping Blueprint irons, a combination of Ping Glide and Titleist Vokey wedges, which is just, it's odd enough to see a guy playing a tour professional, especially at his caliber, playing an array of different clubs, especially with the way equipment manufacturers have just jumped into the all-in method. But to see even a mashup of wedges, it's also really bizarre. He's got a Ping putter mixed in there too. It's like crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Pro V1 golf ball. It's just all over the map.
All over the place. All over the place. But you know what? Hey, worked this week. He got his 3rd win. And now the debate heads into this next event, and I guess the rest of the season. He's won a couple times in the last year or so. Is he? Are we watching him about to take that next step?
Yeah, I think so. He's been in so many great opportunities. I don't know the number off the top of my head how many second places he's had in the last 2-3 years, but he's had a lot of times where he's gotten some bad breaks, especially at the end of rounds, and that's kind of what we saw. We thought maybe was going to happen to him on the par 3 17th, where like I said, his ball was barely out of bounds. His yellow hazard line, water left of the green, and it was, I don't know, inches from being out of play.
Yeah.
And that's something that, it's a yellow marker, so he'd have to go around the water and drop from behind. And so, he ends up making a 5. He's got a relatively easy chip from where he was, and he makes a real easy 3.
Yeah.
So that's something you can see that if Tony Finau it's gone south for him in the past. So it's really, really awesome to see and for him to go well in that scenario. And he's just such a fun guy. Like, he's very animated in the post-game interview or post-round interview, and just really good with the fans too as well. So a deserved champion. Of this
for
for sure.
Piercy, what do we make of how he played? Obviously, not a guy we hear about every week on tour, but a guy who's around. He's in the field more times than not. An abysmal finish for him. I know some people. I saw a few tweets immediately after Sunday where it was kind of talking about the idea that Piercy lost more than Finau won. And I guess there's two parts of that. Is one, how much of that do you buy into? And then the second part of it is, how does a guy like that rebound and continue? Like, you're the guy who's just week in and week out playing. You probably aren't finishing better than top 20 or top 10 very often. And you're so close. And then you just have this, I mean, there were only 4 golfers in the field who shot worse than Scott Piercy did on Sunday, for perspective.
He's a former PGA Tour winner, so I think he can bounce back from it. I don't know if I buy the whole thing that he lost. Finau had to go out and shoot 67.
Right.
It's the second lowest round of the day behind James Hahn on Sunday. So he had to go shoot 67. He wins by 3 relatively comfortably. Comes back from that deficit, like I said, down 5 with 11 to go, ends up winning by 3. A lot of that is obviously helped by Scott Piercy, but I think he has to go and makes a couple tough birdies. He had a couple good up and downs. On 18, he hit his tee shot on the water, making 6, and makes bogey because he doesn't need to make par. You can kind of play safe from there on in. So I think I don't buy totally into that whole he lost the golf tournament versus Tony Finau winning. Definitely a culmination of both the two, but I still think Tony Finau went out and grabbed it by shooting at 67 on Sunday.
Yeah, and plus, if you're Tony Finau and you're coming down the stretch there, just because, and I don't know how much he knew about Piercy's round coming down the stretch, but you have to assume that if you're out there shooting 4 or 5 under, that somebody else who was near you also could have been, if you understood that you were also in the lead and that the former leader had really fallen down. So you had to think that if he was out there shooting that number, that somebody else could have also been putting up a big number to, potentially get in the way or ruin that comeback for him.
Yeah, and Piercy's behind him the whole day too, so he's watching Tony Finau make birdies here and there, and Finau's seeing the scoreboard too of getting higher and higher numbers from Scott Piercy behind him. I think he made a 7 on 14, which really put him back, triple bogey there. So Finau definitely saw it. I mean, if you're going to ask him, he probably didn't look at the scoreboards much, but I don't know if I buy into that whole prospect the guy's not looking at scoreboards. That's kind of what they like to say, but...
Yeah, and I understand the concept where I understand the perspective where I've heard some of the guys talk about it being more visible at certain courses.
Yeah.
Certain layouts and events.
I don't buy into them not looking at it though.
Yeah, they've got to have some idea. The caddy has to be doing some kind of calculation along the line to, turn it up or turn it down, depending on what they think fits. So we move forward now. We're going to Detroit. Rocket Mortgage. 2 events left. This is the second to last event before we get into the playoffs. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But what do you see happening this weekend, or what do we have going on with the field?
Yeah, so 156-man field, $8.4 million purse, a little bit less than the LIV event this week than we'll talk about it later. But taking place at Detroit Golf Club, par 72. Your past champions, Cam Davis last year at 18 under par. The year before that in 2020, Bryson DeChambeau at 23 under. And a golfer that I like a lot who has won me some money in the past, Nate Lashley in 2019 at 25 under par. So definitely a golf course that is very gettable. You'll see some low scores out there this week. I know we had some rough predictions last week, but
Brutal.
Let's try it again. Why not, right?
Brutal.
Let's see what you got.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you 2 predictions here for this week. I'm staying with my prediction from last week in that I think if for those who watch the power rankings week in and week out on the PGA Tour, Tony Finau is like the 3rd or 4th most favored golfer in the field. I'm saying that's that don't go in on that. Avoid that at all costs. I think he's the most overrated golfer in the top 15 right now. Flip side of that, Kevin Kisner is my pick. He's got a good scoring average at this place. It's a little shorter. This is not a long golf course, so this is one that could favor a guy like him. And frankly, when I say that, there's a number of guys that could win that fit into that category, and I think these weeks are most interesting because unless you get a weekend where a Bryson DeChambeau is, or even Cam Davis for that matter, in front, it is open for some of those guys who don't hit it quite as far.
Yeah, Kiz can just go plot himself around the golf course. If he gets that putter going, he gets it hot.
Right.
It's really tough to catch him because he's gonna hit the club on the back of the ball each time and be consistent that way. I like that pick a lot, and I'm gonna pick Adam Scott. I don't know. I just
Crazy.
Something about it really kind of jumped out to me. He's been playing well. T15, the Open Championship 2 weeks ago. His last tournament was the U.S. Open. He was T14 at that one, so he's got a little bit good scoring average coming in with that. And I think it's time we let Paul Russo give us his prediction for this week's tournament.
Can't imagine who that's going to be.
Ricky Fowler, ride or die.
Of course, Ricky Fowler, who's only playing probably because of a sponsor's exemption. But let's, I guess, just move on from that. It would be, I would say this. It would be a nice gesture, or it would be a nice thing for golf if Ricky Fowler got another win. Not saying he's ever going to return to the elite status I think that he held in the early third of his career, but if he got a win, it would be good for golf. It would be good feeling story.
He was huge for golf. I mean, you think about especially with young people too. You were taking a look at whether it be on the public golf courses or whether it be at the events, guys wearing fully orange, all wearing Puma golf clothes. Oh, yeah. It was so cool what he kind of brought to golf and how he played, and he's still a fun story to watch and kind of someone you always remember. Yeah. It would be, like you said, that would be really cool if he was able to break back in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Regular season is winding down. We're almost to the playoffs. This is, I think, from my perspective, I think it's interesting because these last couple events, as we close out, there's not much of a gap now between the Open and obviously the playoffs. But I want to start to see some kind of progress from some of these guys that are, in the mix but not in the mix, because I think right now heading into the playoffs, it's kind of everybody waiting to see what Rory and Scheffler are going to do.
Right.
And, obviously Cam as well. So it's those three players. I'm curious to see who else gets themselves into the mix to maybe be a serious contender coming down the stretch and win the FedEx Cup.
Right. And I like looking at that too, but I also like looking at the back end of it. Guys fighting for their tour card, trying to get in that top 125 so you can get in the St. Jude Classic. It's a little bit different this year since you have probably about 7 or 8 LIV guys that are in there who are going to be plucked out of the equation. So you're looking at the top 132, 133 gets you in that St. Jude tournament. So it's going to be really interesting to watch. I love looking at the kind of the back end, the guys fighting for their tour card, kind of looking into their stories and stuff too. I love that almost as much as what it is at the top.
Yeah, and it's the one, I would say, the one area that the tour doesn't do the best job of really promoting and showcasing, because it's week in and week out, it is a bit more interesting than just simply who won or lost, because that wears off really, really quickly as far as the headlines are concerned.
I just love the stories that come out of it too. It's especially one of my favorite Twitter accounts out there, Case of the Mondays, the Monday Qualifier. He dips into that a little bit too, talking about kind of how guys get there and their stories and kind of how they've fought and through and been able to play on the tour and try to get there too. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, and playing on tour, not everybody's going to be playing on tour this weekend. We talked about it, mentioned it earlier. LIV is in New Jersey, and they are at Trump National. Lots of money, and on paper, an equally strong field-ish, right?
Yeah, 10 guys in the top 50 of the world golf ranking, same as what has happened at the Rocket Mortgage. It's just really interesting when I was kind of diving in those numbers earlier today. You start to see guys that are sliding out of the world
already
world golf rankings. I mean, Dustin Johnson was I think he was up to 3 or 4 by the mid part of this year. He's at 17 now.
Yeah. Yeah, and we talked about it last week. We talked about that's the graph that one of the golf reporters tweeted week ago now, where it showed exactly where all of these players would end up at the end of the year, not collecting points through these LIV events, and Dustin Johnson would be leading the entire LIV field at ranked 42nd or 43rd.
Yep.
I mean, that's just a huge loss for, I think, more for them than for anybody else.
One thing I want to talk about LIV, more so than just this specific week, is I kind of want to talk to you and get your opinion on the viewing experience as a fan. So you have your traditional PGA Tour event starts at 7:30, 8 o'clock Eastern Time and concludes around, 4 to 5 o'clock. So you have two waves of golfers. So you have about 8.5 to 9 hours of golf a day.
Yeah.
That you can kind of walk around the golf course. You can really get to see a bunch of different players, or you can choose to sit on a hole for 2-3 hours and watch guys come through. So in essence, you can really almost see almost everybody that's out there playing.
Yeah. Yep.
LIV, you have shotgun starts, so it's only 4 to 4.5 hours. So you can't really see everybody. You can stay. You can stay in one spot and see everybody, or you can follow a group. I just kind of want to get your perspective, because in some ways it's better watching that way, because it's not 9 hours of your day, it's 4 hours, 4.5 hours, and you could see a Chainsmokers concert too. So it's kind of interesting. I want to see what your kind of opinion is. Would you rather be there for 9 hours, or would you rather be there for 4 hours? And maybe not just your opinion, but what you think the public would kind of feel not having to be there all day.
I think if you're there, it's probably a better experience at the LIV event.
Yeah.
Right now. It's more concise. It's kind of like a football game in terms of how long
it's
the
just not your
time
whole day.
investment. It's not your whole day. As far as, to me, you have to be cognizant of what's happening on the watching side, not the who's there. If an event gets 10 or 15 or 20,000 people over the course of a 3 or 4 day stretch, that's considered a victory. But if you're only reaching 15 or 20,000 people and you're not capturing people who are actually like eyes glued to devices, TVs, tablets, whatever the case may be, you're losing. Like you're not growing your product. And I think that's where the disconnect begins. It's chaos. Watching LIV Golf is chaos. And I suppose it would be kind of cool if you're actually at the event and you can there's golf happening everywhere. You don't really have to think too hard about where golf is. Golf is just literally happening on every hole at all times.
It is chaos.
But at the same time, say there's a couple groups you want to watch. And one of them is shotgun start on 9. The other one is starting on 13. Halfway through, how do you make that calculation of like, oh, where's that other group? Like, where are they? You're going to be sitting there trying to figure out like how fast they're playing, how many holes they've covered. It just becomes very complicated unless you are the kind of fan who is simply planted and not moving, and you're going to see everybody by the end of it. But I think the thing that makes golf so interesting from the fan's perspective, who's actually there, is that ability to walk along and follow. Right. So I think it kind of drives the mentality of like following a specific group. And for those people, I think it's just as good an experience. Then, of course, there's been lots of examples of how much more engaging the LIV events are, because they're more like festivals and less like a traditional golf tournament. That's good. I think that's a win for the people who are going to those events.
Yeah, and I think it kind of aligns with the whole idea. I think we've talked about this before. With golf, you have playing the forward tees, trying to speed up the game, playing a golf course that you've seen some that would be like 12, 13, 14 holes instead of 18 holes. So trying to kind of eliminate the fact that it takes 5 hours to play 18 holes of golf. So I think that kind of aspect kind of relates to the LIV Tour too, where they can take 4.5 hours versus 9 hours you have to spend at a PGA Tour event, and I think that's going to align with some people.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd be interested to see LIV take that a step further, especially if they're really interested in speeding up play or helping the game get faster, because I think public golf courses struggle with that the most, pace of play, is putting a clock on these guys. Putting a clock on the actual movement that we're seeing on the course and forcing them to play in under 4.5 hours, or forcing them to play under 4.25, or whatever the number might be. They've got the opportunity now, in my opinion, because before These golfers on tour are literally trying to gain world ranking points. There's all these different things in play for them. Whereas now this is quite literally exhibition golf.
Yes.
Who cares? Yeah, you can literally play as fast or as slow as you want. It doesn't matter. You've already gotten paid. Like all of the things that mattered before are out the window. So put a shot clock on them. You want to really shake things up, put a shot clock on them.
Only 48 guys out there. You should be able to move pretty quick.
What do you think? I'm curious though. What do you think about the viewing experience from the person who's watching it the way most people consume golf, which is on a screen? What do you think the live experience for you watching? Has it made sense? Is it confusing? Do you like it, or does it feel about the same as traditional tour golf, PGA Tour golf?
That's a good question. I think you used a good word. It's a little chaotic at first.
Yeah.
Because you're not used to it. They just keep going to different guys hitting golf shots. Yeah. And you're like, oh, this. But you kind of warm up to that fact. You're like, oh, this is cool.
Right.
And I think adding David Faraday is really going to resonate with people because that's a voice you're going to hear, and it's going to be a little bit more calming too. And then look at if they add Charles Barkley. Yeah. That's even better. I mean, that's the next thing we can talk about, I suppose, is that Charles Barkley had a meeting with Greg Norman last week about possibly joining the staff on LIV Tour and LIV Golf, and I think that would be a huge get for them. Charles Barkley had a really great interview with Dan Patrick late last week where he kind of talked about, and Charles Barkley's always a guy that kind of lays it really on right. Like he says kind of what he feels, and he told and said to Dan Patrick, I don't want to leave TNT in limbo. Right. I don't want to kind of teeter back and forth between LIV Golf and TNT. He said, I'm playing at a Pro-Am on Thursday. Yes. And I need to answer, because he said it in the video, by the time I'm leaving the golf course, in my car, I need to hear from Greg Norman and see do we want to do this? Because if he doesn't hear from him Thursday night, nope, he's never doing it. He's done.
Yeah,
and I admire that.
Yeah, I like the directness. I like the fact that he was very open about there's a number. Mm-hmm. Like he has his number that he's willing to go
said
for.
3 times what he gets paid, and he said he gets paid around $20 million. Is kind of what Dan Patrick found it. Charles Barkley wouldn't say what he gets paid, right? But Dan Patrick says, "Say you get paid $20 million," and Chuck said, "Yeah, that's about right." So I would say about $60 million gets it done, and $60 million to the Saudis,
not much.
Nothing.
So my takeaway from that whole discussion at this point, especially given the fact that they have Faraday, is do they need a Barkley? Because it seems like Barkley is the guy you go get if you want like personality, maybe some laughs, and kind of what we've seen out of the match series with what he's brought to those broadcasts, which is just, you're not getting any golf insight from him. Like you're getting zero golf analysis from him. You're just kind of getting the funny guy. And I wonder if, Faraday blends both really well. Yes. And now I wonder if they have Faraday. Do they need a Charles Barkley?
He gets your younger crowd though. Barkley does.
I think he gets a new crowd. He definitely brings in a different crowd. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily know if that's going to change the number of eyeballs that are on. But again, are these moves being made to actually move the needle, or just because they can?
Right.
Which is kind of where as we think about these different people and different things, and we're going to talk about Cam Smith in a minute here because that's still percolating just beneath the surface, it seems. How much of this is, the Saudis flexing their financial muscle because they can versus, a Henrik Stenson brings absolutely nothing to the LIV Tour. Right. The only thing that does is it kind of throws a stick in the spokes of the Ryder Cup and the PGA Tour and the Euro team. So I don't know. I'm curious. I think all things considered, we're probably going to see him go. Charles Barkley, talking about, he's probably going to go. And my curiosity will then be watching how TNT reacts to that. Do they immediately disband him? Does he walk away from them because he doesn't want to be committed to both? How does that part of it play out?
He said in a perfect world he'd be involved in both, but Turner Media, kind of who runs TNT, I don't think they'd let him.
Right. Yeah. Which feels like it's probably a good answer. Anyway, back to this upcoming week's LIV event in New Jersey. predictions? Do you have a favorite that you're watching to win this thing?
Probably Bryson. He's been posting some stuff on social media. He's getting a lot of his club head speed back. Feels a little bit better coming off, I believe it was a wrist injury.
Yep.
And he's kind of, I don't know, for lack of better term, getting his swagger back. Bryson's that guy that likes to swing the golf club as fast as he can and get it on video and post videos with Dude Perfect and kind of have all that fun. So I think when he feels that way, I think he plays his best golf. So I like Bryson this week.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say Abe Answer is my favorite this week.
Oh, I love Abe Answer.
And I think for LIV's sake, they need one of their young, pricey guns to win a golf tournament. I don't think you can really get away with week in and week out for these LIV events, just having kind of the guys that nobody really thinks about as being the big losses for the tour.
Do they care who wins?
Well, I don't think any of the players really care. But I think in terms of,
Do you think Greg Norman does?
I think Greg Norman cares. I think Greg Norman might care more about this than anybody else involved, honestly. So yeah, Abe Answer. Abe Answer is my pick, and I think he could probably. Bryson is just such a question mark. I don't know whether he's hurt or whether he's on top of the world. One swing of the driver, it seems, could either be another prolonged injury or him just blasting it off the face of Earth and not being able to find a golf ball until the tournament ends.
He's so much fun.
He is. Cam Smith. We talked a little bit about it last week, immediately after the Open. Has your opinion changed at all about where he's going or where he's not going?
I think eventually he'll get over to the LIV Tour. I think they kind of have a semi-deal in place, but I think he's going to wait until after the FedEx Cup playoffs. There's $18 million on the line. He's in second place behind Scheffler. All it takes is a good couple finishes for him in the playoff events, or maybe even a victory in one of those events, and he could take home that $18 million. So I think they have a kind of, I don't know if partial is the right word for that, a deal in place for him to kind of go at the end of this PGA Tour season.
That's interesting. That would be an interesting way for that to play out, but I don't think he's going to go. I think push comes to shove, he's one of the tour's biggest faces, and I think one way or another, whether it be the tour working with different big names in golf, as in like manufacturers and companies, they're going to find a way to make sure that their top talent after this season is over is retained. And whether that be a kind of prominent place in the tour media side, or whether it be just straight up getting paid through lucrative deals, it's the mid to lower end of the player spectrum that I think is going to kind of be faced with the choice of, do I keep being a mid card, or do I go to LIV and get paid more than I can potentially make in a season on tour here?
Yeah, you think about guys that have been grinding on the PGA Tour and just trying to, even if they're on the Korn Ferry Tour and trying to get to the PGA Tour, they can keep grinding, and there's stories of guys that have maxed out credit cards in order to get to the next week's tournament event and to pay their caddy and all that stuff, or they can accept a 7-figure deal from LIV. I mean, it's almost, I don't want to say easy decision, but it can be. You have a family that you need to feed, you have obligations you need to pay for. So it's really, like you said, I think it's really interesting for those mid to even lower than mid guys on the PGA Tour, on the Korn Ferry Tour, and what it's going to take for them to maybe say no to the proposition, or even to say yes to that said deal.
Yeah, and I think also the other crop of those players would be the college to recently graduated college players as well. So let's talk a little bit about local golf. Obviously, FingerLakes1.com, we're located here in the Finger Lakes. And local golf is something that we definitely want to incorporate into this podcast. So let's talk a little bit about Ontario Golf Club. They have been undergoing a really massive transformation over the last several months. Anybody who's checked them out here in the region on Facebook has seen what that looks like. It boggles my mind just knowing the nature of that investment and how risky it is for anybody to invest like that in a golf course in a region that is so obviously, it snows a lot up here. It's a seasonal business. It's not like we're down in Myrtle Beach or in Florida or anything like that. It's a tough egg to crack, and it seems as though there's been a lot of energy behind that transformation. And we were up there about a month ago, and it was really impressive just seeing how much energy had been put into it and how excited everybody is around that change.
Yeah, you take a look at their Facebook page, and they've been putting up tons of pictures where they're cart path and the whole thing. Pub 235, which is a prominent kind of restaurant in Webster, I believe, has opened basically almost on the putting green, and they've put up some pictures of that too, and it's been spectacular to look at. I mean, you could take a look at some of those cart paths and where they're coming in through the golf course. It's a really, really pretty track. We had a lot of fun when we went up there, Josh. I'm sure we'll go again by the end of the season. And going back to kind of the future of golf, I just think it's in a really good spot. So it's definitely a really good investment. I mean, we've seen since the pandemic, golf numbers have just gone through the roof. New people to the game that haven't even really known what golf is, and been able to go to the golf course and get away from maybe their work from home job, or get away and do it safely from other things too. So I think it's really an interesting investment, like you said, but I think it's something that it could be a good investment in the long run.
Yeah. And of course, every week we're going to be spotlighting a golf course or two, or we'll be spotlighting something in local golf that we came across in the 6 or 7 days before that. So keep your eyes peeled. And of course, if you want to get in touch with the show or want your questions answered or whatever the case may be, you can drop us an email. It's outofbounds@fingerlakes1.com. You can also check out FO1 Sports on TikTok, or you can just find us the old-fashioned way on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search Finger Lakes 1.
Yep, right down on YouTube comments too works as well. So many different ways to reach us.
YouTube comments, yes. We're watching the YouTube comments, and we're also watching the bots at
also,
work.
If you just go to any golf course in the greater Rochester area on a Friday, Saturday afternoon, you might find Josh and I. We do enjoy play some golf in those days.
All right, that's all the time we have for this week. Obviously, as we said, if you have something to say, drop us an email, drop us a line. We will get you incorporated into the show. For Nate Sharman, I'm Josh Durso. We will catch you next week on the Out of Bounds podcast.